My name is Lena Whitaker. I was 32. The afternoon I realized my family had learned how to erase a person without raising their voice. I had been awake for almost 26 hours. The night before, my grandmother, Mabel Royce, had slipped on the bathroom tile and hit her shoulder hard enough that the whole left side of her body folded in on itself. I was the one who found her. I was the one who rode in the ambulance. I was the one who sat beside her bed while she kept asking if she had left the stove on, even though I had checked it twice. By 3 o'clock the next day, my scrubs smelled like hospital coffee and antiseptic. My hair was still damp from rinsing off in the staff bathroom. I walked into the care conference room expecting to talk about her medication, her balance, whether she could come home with help. Instead, I heard the case manager say, "Mr. Vale, it's wonderful that your grandmother has such a committed primary caregiver." Preston smiled, like a man receiving a plaque. My cousin Preston had visited Grandma 5 times in 6 months. 3 of those visits were on Sundays, after church, when his shirt was pressed and somebody had a phone camera out. He did not know which side she slept on. He did not know she hated orange pills because one once got stuck in her throat. He did not know that if you gave her oatmeal without brown sugar, she would call you cheap, even on a bad memory day. I waited for my Aunt Rochelle to correct the mistake. She didn't. So I said, quietly, "I'm the one who's been doing the overnight care." Rochelle turned to me with that soft public smile she used at church dinners. "Honey," she said, "you're trained for this. That's different." And just like that, 6 months of my life became a skill set instead of a sacrifice. Here's a fun little challenge. I bet you are watching this video while lying down with your legs crossed right now. If I guessed correctly, type 3 in the comments. And if you enjoy this story and would like to support our team, please consider buying us a cup of coffee through the link in the description. Thank you so much for your kindness and support. Alright, enough talking, let's begin the story. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. In my family, silence was treated like maturity, especially from me. You let Rochelle finish. You let Preston charm the room. You let the adults choose the version that sounded cleanest in public. And if your version had too many pills, too many sleepless nights, too many wet towels from bathroom accidents, then it stayed in your throat. Paula Greer, the case manager, looked down at the folder in front of her. She had silver reading glasses and the careful voice of a woman who had watched families split open under fluorescent lights before. "I want to make sure we have the correct contact list," she said. "Mr. Vale is listed here as the primary family contact and the person coordinating home care." For a second, I thought I had misheard her. Preston shifted in his chair, but he didn't look at me. He kept rolling the cardboard sleeve on his coffee cup with his thumb. My Aunt Rochelle sat beside him with her purse on her lap, both hands folded over the clasp, like she was waiting for someone else to be judged. "No," I said, "that's not right." Rochelle sighed before I even finished. Not loudly, not rudely. Just enough for everyone to hear that I was becoming difficult. "Lena," she said, "we had to clean up some paperwork. You work nights. You're exhausted. Half the time nobody can reach you." I stared at her. "That's because I'm either at work or with Grandma." Her face softened in that dangerous way people use when they want cruelty to sound reasonable. "And that is exactly why we needed someone steady on paper. Someone who can answer calls without turning every decision into a wound." There it was. Emotional, without saying emotional. The word women in my family used when another woman remembered too much. I looked at Darren, my uncle, sitting 2 chairs down in his contractor jacket, his phone face down on the table. Darren had seen me at Grandma's kitchen table at midnight, sorting pills into the blue-lidded box. He had watched me lift her laundry basket with one hand and hold her elbow with the other. If anyone in that room knew what was true, he did. But he only rubbed his forehead and said, "Maybe they're just trying to help you breathe, Lena. Help me breathe." I almost laughed. I had been breathing in short pieces for 6 months. Paula tapped her pen once against the folder. "Miss Whitaker, are you saying you were not aware this contact change was made?" "No," I said. "I wasn't aware." Rochelle's mouth tightened. It wasn't meant to exclude you. But it had. It had excluded me from the fall, risk evaluation, the medication review, and the first discharge conversation. By the time I heard about Grandma's options, everyone else had already been handed a version of her future with my name left out of it. Before I could say that, a nurse cracked the conference room door. "Mrs. Royce is awake," she said. "She's asking for Lena." I stood so fast, the chair legs scraped the floor. Grandma was propped against two pillows when I entered, small under the hospital blanket, her white hair flattened on one side. Her eyes found mine, cloudy but present. "Baby," she whispered. "Why did Preston tell that woman he knows my morning pills?" Grandma's question sat between us like a glass someone had dropped, but no one wanted to sweep up. I touched her blanket and told her I would handle it, because that was the job I had somehow become in my family. Not the granddaughter. Not the tired one. The person who handled what everyone else found inconvenient. Pills, laundry, phone calls, insurance forms. The little panicked moments when Grandma woke up, thinking she was 27, and late for work at a bakery that had closed before I was born. After she fell asleep, I drove to her house for the blue care notebook. I kept it in the second kitchen drawer, under the potholders she refused to throw away because my grandfather had bought them at a church sale in 1989. For 6 months, that notebook had been my second brain. Blood pressure readings, medication changes, foods she could keep down, the mornings she was sharpest, the names of people who promised to visit and the dates they didn't. Without it, I would have to argue from memory, while Preston argued from my handwriting. The drawer was empty. At first, I thought I had moved it, because exhaustion does small, cruel things to your memory. I checked the counter, the mail basket, the shelf by the phone. Then I opened every drawer in that kitchen like the notebook might have grown legs and hidden itself behind the dish towels. Nothing. I texted Preston. "Where is Grandma's blue notebook?" He answered 8 minutes later. "Borrowed it for the forms." Relax. I stared at the word relax until my screen dimmed. Then I drove to Rochelle's house. Her porch light was on, and through the front window I could see people moving in the living room. When Rochelle opened the door, she didn't look surprised to see me. That told me more than anything. Behind her, Preston sat in Grandma's old recliner, the one they had moved over for comfort photos, holding the blue notebook in his lap while Gloria Penn angled her phone toward him. "Just one more," Gloria said. "Look down at the notes like you're remembering something tender." Preston lowered his eyes like a man who'd practiced sadness just for the afternoon. I stepped inside. "That notebook is mine." Rochelle's smile tightened. "It's your grandmother's care notebook. I wrote every page of it, and we're using it to help her." On the coffee table, beside Gloria's purse, lay a printed draft. It had the church letterhead at the top. I saw the line before Rochelle turned it over. "Preston Vale has spent 6 months quietly caring for his grandmother full-time." Rochelle took my elbow and steered me toward the kitchen. She moved me out of frame of the phone camera, out from Preston, and out of the clean version of the story they were building without me. "Don't embarrass this family," she said softly, "because you need applause." I looked back through the doorway at Preston, still holding my handwriting in both hands, and understood that they had not taken my notebook to help Grandma. They had taken it so they could learn how to sound like they had done the work. By the time I left Rochelle's house, the sun had dropped behind the maples. The windows along her street glowed with that warm, decent-looking light that makes every family seem kinder from the outside. I sat in my car with both hands on the steering wheel. I tried to decide whether to go back in and take the notebook, but I could already see how Rochelle would tell it. Lena stormed in. Lena caused a scene. Lena frightened everyone. So I drove away, not because I was done. I finally understood they wanted me to fight in a room where they controlled the lighting. The next morning, the story had already moved faster than I could. I stopped at Keller's Market on my way back to the hospital. Grandma liked the little cups of peach yogurt they kept near the deli. I was standing by the dairy case when Mrs. Altman from church touched my arm with a sad smile. Lena, she said, I just want you to know there's no shame in needing rest. I looked at her hand on my sleeve. What? She lowered her voice. Your aunt said Preston stepping in is probably a blessing. Sometimes the strongest girls don't know when to let go. Strongest girls. I was 32 years old, holding yogurt cups like evidence. Somehow I had been turned into a tired girl who needed rescuing from the very work everyone had left me to do. I said, Preston isn't stepping in. He's posing. Mrs. Altman's face changed just enough to tell me she'd already heard the cleaned-up version. That was how Rochelle worked. She did not have to call me unstable. She only had to make other people feel sorry for me in a way that made my voice sound unreliable before I even opened my mouth. At the hospital, Paula met me outside Grandma's room with a folder tucked against her chest. She didn't look unkind, but she looked cautious, which was worse. Cautious meant my family had already made me part of the problem. We need to talk about discharge options, she said. Inside the small consultation room, she explained there were two possible paths. Grandma could go home with a reliable care rotation and home health support, or she could transfer to Silver Pines for rehabilitation and longer-term monitoring. Silver Pines was 90 minutes away, past Mill Creek, in a part of the county Grandma only knew from weather reports. I said no before Paula finished. Not because facilities are bad. I know better than that. I have worked with families who waited too long, who promised home care they couldn't provide, who loved someone straight into danger because they couldn't admit love was not a lift belt or a medication schedule. But Grandma had been clear for months. If she could safely try home first, she wanted home first. Paula nodded slowly. Your aunt believes Silver Pines may be the safest option, I said. My aunt doesn't know where Grandma keeps the spare hearing aid batteries. Paula looked down. The family contact on file has raised concerns about home reliability. There it was again. On file. Those two words had become a locked door. Silver Pines sounded even colder because Preston had sold a parcel near their expansion lot the year before, and Rochelle kept calling that a coincidence before anyone had accused her of anything. Darren was in the hallway when I came out. Rochelle must have called him, because he looked prepared for my reaction before I had one. Lena, he said, maybe you're too close to this. Maybe Rochelle is just trying to take pressure off you. He said pressure like it was weather, not 6 months of people choosing not to show up. Before I could answer, a nurse wheeled Grandma past us for imaging, her thin hands folded over the blanket, her eyes half open. She turned her head when she heard my voice. Don't let them send me where nobody knows the hymn I hum in the morning, she whispered. Darren looked away first. That was when I understood the fight had changed. They were not just taking credit for what I had done. They were using that credit to decide where Grandma would wake up next. Paula did not hand me the whole file at first, and I respected her for that. Hospital people learn to speak in narrow hallways, careful phrases, and partial permissions. She looked toward Grandma's room, then back at me. If Mrs. Royce wants you present, I can review the portions that relate directly to discharge planning. That was the first kind sentence I had heard all morning. Not because it promised me anything, but because it remembered Grandma was still a person at the center of all this paperwork. We waited until Grandma was back from imaging, and awake enough to answer. Paula leaned close and asked, Mrs. Royce, do you want Lena included in conversations about your care? Grandma blinked slowly, annoyed that anyone needed to ask. Of course, she said. She knows where things are. It was such a small sentence, not poetic, not dramatic. But after a day of being erased by titles and folders, hearing my grandmother place me back inside the truth almost made my knees give. Paula nodded, opened the folder, and turned it so I could see the caregiver summary. At first, I did not understand what I was looking at. The paragraphs sounded familiar in a way that made my stomach tighten before my mind caught up. Mabel tolerates peach yogurt better than applesauce after morning medication. Patient becomes most oriented between 8:30 and 10:15 a.m. Avoid orange tablets when possible due to swallowing anxiety. Those were my notes. Not similar notes. Not family observations. Mine. I knew because I had written that line about orange tablets after Grandma cried in my kitchen, embarrassed by her own fear of choking. But the name beside those observations was not mine. It was Preston's. Preston had been listed as the family member providing daily care coordination and symptom tracking. There were even phrases from my notebook softened into professional language, as if someone had washed my exhaustion clean and dressed it in his shirt. If they could make him sound like the person who knew her body, they could make his opinion sound safer than mine. I looked at Paula. She looked back with the kind of stillness people use when they realize the problem is larger than the form in front of them. "Who submitted this?" I asked. She hesitated. "It came through the family contact. Preston. Or Rochelle, using Preston's name." At that moment, I did not care which one had typed it. I cared that my handwriting had crossed a desk without me, become his credibility, and returned to the hospital as a reason to trust him over me. Paula turned another page halfway. Then she stopped. "There's also a copy attached from the church outreach program," she said. "It appears Mr. Vale was nominated for their Family Caregiver Recognition Sunday." I stared at her. "For caring for Grandma?" Paula's mouth pressed into a thin line. "The nomination says he provided consistent hands-on care." The same packet is also being used to decide which families qualify for church-funded respite help. I thought of Gloria in Rochelle's living room, telling Preston to look tender while he held my notebook. I thought of Mrs. Altman in the grocery aisle. She touched my sleeve as if I were something fragile. The story had not spread by accident. It had been packaged, neatly, kindly, with church letterhead and soft lighting. Paula slid one more page free, then lowered her voice. "Lena, there's another document attached to the discharge recommendation." She tapped the top of it once. Not dramatic, just enough to show this was the part that mattered next. "It says you agreed home care had become unreliable." For a second, the room lost its edges. Grandma was breathing softly behind the curtain. Machines clicked. Somewhere down the hall, a man laughed at a television show like ordinary life had not just tilted under my feet. I looked at the sentence again, the one that claimed I had agreed to the very thing I had been fighting against. Something inside me went cold and steady. "I never said that," I told Paula. She did not argue. She only looked toward the hallway, where my family was waiting, and said, "Then we need to understand why they think you did." I read the statement once, then again, because the first time my eyes kept trying to reject the words. It did not say I had asked for help. It said I had acknowledged that home care was no longer reliable. It did not say my family had failed to show up. It said I had become overwhelmed. That was what made it so hard to fight. The lie had been built around one sentence I really said, wrapped in enough truth to make me sound unstable, and everyone else sound responsible. I knew exactly where they had found it. 3 weeks earlier, at 2:13 inches the morning, I had called Rochelle from Grandma's kitchen. Grandma had been awake since midnight, convinced there were children crying under the house. There was no basement, only a crawl space full of paint cans and old Christmas wreaths. I had been due at work by 7. Rochelle had promised to come by so I could sleep for 2 hours. At 1:45, she texted that she had a migraine, and Preston could maybe stop after a showing. He never came. By 2:13, I was standing barefoot on Grandma's cold linoleum, whispering into the phone because Grandma had finally dozed off in the recliner. I said, "I don't know how long I can keep doing this alone." That was all. Not that Grandma should be sent away, not that home was unsafe, not that I wanted out. Just one honest sentence from a tired woman to an aunt who should have heard it as a request for help. Rochelle had heard it as material. When Paula stepped into the hall to take a call, I found Darren by the vending machines. He was staring at a row of chips like the right answer might be behind the glass. I told him about the statement. He looked uncomfortable before he looked surprised, which told me he remembered more than he wanted to. "You called me that night too," he said quietly. "I saw it the next morning." He opened his mouth like he wanted to defend Rochelle, then closed it when he realized he would have to defend the night he ignored my call too. I figured she handled it, he said. She handled it, I told him. Just not Grandma. For the first time since he had arrived, Darren did not tell me I was too close to it. He leaned back against the wall and looked toward Grandma's room. What do you need? It should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like grief arriving late. I had spent 6 months begging people with my silence. Now that same silence had been filed against me. I need Grandma asked what she wants when she's actually awake, I said. And I need you to stop letting Rochelle answer for everybody. Darren nodded once, slow and ashamed. If you can show she was never really asked, I'll sit on your side at the care meeting. That was not a rescue. It was not even an apology, but it was the first crack in the wall Rochelle had built out of my exhaustion. Now I had to stop arguing about who had done the work and start asking why no one had asked Grandma what she wanted. Darren's promise did not fix anything, but it changed where I put my hands. Until then, I had been reaching for the wrong thing. I wanted the notebook back. I wanted Rochelle to admit what she had done. I wanted Preston to say, out loud, that he had accepted credit for care he never gave. Those things still mattered, but they were no longer the center. The center was Grandma, lying in a hospital bed, while everyone around her translated her life into forms she had not been allowed to read. So I stopped trying to be seen and started trying to make Grandma heard. I asked Paula whether the nursing notes showed the same thing I had seen at home. Grandma was clearest in the morning, usually between breakfast and the first wave of afternoon fatigue. Paula checked the chart, then nodded. If Grandma understood the question and answered consistently during that window, her preference could be documented. That one word, yes, felt like a door opening, not wide, not enough to walk through yet, but enough to stop pressing my forehead against the wall. That afternoon, I went back to Grandma's house, not to search drawers this time, but to look at the life everyone kept reducing to home care. On the refrigerator was the home health visit sheet, held up by a magnet shaped like a tomato. Beside it were prescription pickup slips, a church meal calendar, and a sticky note in Grandma's shaky handwriting that said, "No tuna on Tuesdays." It repeats. I stood there smiling for the first time all day, because that was Grandma. Even scared, even tired, she still had opinions strong enough to survive hospitalization. I called Mrs. Klein from next door. She was the retired librarian who had been checking on Grandma most Monday mornings before anyone in my family thought to ask. She did not make a speech. She only said, "I can do Monday, Wednesday, Friday before lunch, but I won't pretend to do nights." I almost thanked her too hard. Then I called Darren and told him Tuesday and Thursday evenings were his if he meant what he had said. He was quiet for a moment, then answered, "Put me down." It was the first time responsibility sounded less like a favor and more like a name on a line. By early evening, I had a draft care rotation that was imperfect but real. Home health for bathing, Mrs. Klein for morning check-ins, Darren for 2 evenings, me for medication setup and 2 overnights, not 7. It was not heroic. It was not church photo pretty. It was the kind of plan families should have made before one person started drowning quietly. I wrote it in block letters on a yellow legal pad, because I wanted every promise visible enough that no one could later pretend it had only been a feeling. The next morning, Paula asked Grandma in that clear, patient voice professionals use when they are trying not to lead. "Mrs. Royce, if it can be done safely, where would you like to go first?" Grandma looked at me, then at the window. "Home," she said. "Not forever if it isn't safe, but first." For the first time in days, I let myself believe we might have a chance. Then Preston's message hit the family group chat. Friday meeting moved to Thursday morning. Mom says Lena already knows. The message did not just move the meeting. It made my absence look like agreement before I even had a chance to answer. I stared at Preston's message until the words started to blur. Thursday morning. Not Friday. Not the day Paula had mentioned in the hallway. Not the day I had built the draft around. Not the day Darren had agreed to show up prepared. Thursday morning, when I was scheduled for a hospice shift across town with a man whose daughter was flying in from Arizona to say goodbye, Rochelle had not just stolen a day. She had chosen the one morning I would look cruel for walking away from someone else who needed me. I called her immediately. She did not answer. Of course she didn't. People like Rochelle don't call back when staying quiet does more damage. I texted the group. I was told nothing. The meeting must stay Friday, Preston replied first. Mom said hospital schedules changed. Darren sent a question mark. Then Rochelle finally wrote, "This is about your grandmother's safety, not what's convenient for you." She'd made duty sound selfish with one word. As if my job, my patience, my sleep, my body, my entire life outside Grandma's hospital room were all little preferences I kept selfishly arranging. I called Paula next. She sounded tired in the way professionals sound when a family has started treating procedure like a weapon. "The request came from the family contact," she said. "They said Thursday was the only time all decision makers could attend." I closed my eyes. I am one of the decision makers. There was a pause. Not long, but long enough. "I know," she said. "I'm documenting that you objected to the change." That helped, but it did not move the meeting. The hospital could not hold Grandma indefinitely while we argued over who had been told what. That night, I tried to fix the impossible with a legal pad and a phone charger. I called my hospice supervisor, who had already covered too many of my shifts that month. I called the night nurse to ask whether my patient's daughter had arrived. I called Darren and told him, if I was late, he had to keep Rochelle from answering for Grandma. He said he would try. That was not the same as a promise, and we both knew it. Then, at 10:40, 1 p.m., Gloria's church post went live. The photo showed Preston in Grandma's recliner, head bowed over my blue notebook. The caption read, "The grandson who never left." I sat on the edge of my bed and looked at my own handwriting in his hands. For a second, I felt so tired, I could not even be angry. Then I noticed something Gloria had not meant to show. On the corner of the open page was my abbreviation, LW, overnight, 2:10 a.m., refused water, settled after him. No one who actually read that page would have posted it. Gloria had posted the proof because she did not know enough to hide it. By morning, I had slept less than 2 hours. I went to my hospice shift first because I had made that promise before Rochelle moved the battlefield. I helped my patient's daughter wash her father's face. I found her a chair. I stood in a room where grief was honest, and no one was trying to photograph it for applause. Once the charge nurse confirmed coverage, I handed off early to a coworker who squeezed my arm and said, "Go take care of your grandmother." I drove to the hospital with my hair still pinned wrong and my chest tight enough to hurt. I was 14 minutes late. When I reached the consultation room, Rochelle was already speaking in her calmest voice. Preston sat beside her, clean and ready, phone face down, like a man pretending not to wait for praise. Darren looked up when I entered, relief and guilt crossing his face at the same time. Grandma sat in a wheelchair near the window, smaller than she had looked the day before. Paula stood by the folder, pen in hand, and I walked in just as Paula asked, "Mrs. Royce, do you understand that Silver Pines is being recommended because home care has been described as unreliable?" For a second, nobody moved. Paula's question was still hanging in the air when I stepped inside. I saw Grandma's fingers tighten around the edge of the blanket on her lap. She looked from Paula to Rochelle, then to Preston. She was trying to find the person who had put those words around her life. Unreliable. It sounded so clean, so professional, so far away from the tomato magnet on her refrigerator, the oatmeal she complained about, and the hymns she hummed when she was scared. Rochelle recovered first. She always did. "Lena," she said with a smile that warned me not to make this ugly, "we were just helping your grandmother understand her options." Preston leaned back slightly, as if distance could make him neutral. Gloria sat beside him with her tote bag on her lap, church badge clipped to the strap. Silver Pines has an opening Monday, Preston said. That matters. We can't let emotion keep Grandma in an unsafe situation. That was when I understood the second turn in the road. Proving Preston lied would not be enough. Even if I showed every note, every missed visit, every borrowed page, they had already moved the argument somewhere else. This was no longer about who had done the caregiving. It was about whether Grandma's own home could be described as unsafe before anyone gave her a fair chance to choose it. Rochelle had stopped trying to take my credit. She was using the story she stole to take Grandma's voice. Paula looked from the folder to Grandma. The request submitted this morning asks that Mrs. Royce not be discharged home unless the family can demonstrate reliable coverage. My draft care plan was in my bag, folded beside the printed screenshot of Gloria's post. Suddenly, both felt smaller than I needed them to be. It was a plan for care. Rochelle had turned the meeting into a test of whether Grandma had the right to want care at all. Rochelle reached for Grandma's hand. Mom, we all want what's safest. Grandma stared at her fingers and did not answer. Rochelle spoke again, louder this time, as if volume could pass for concern. You don't want to be a burden, do you? That did it. Darren's face changed. Not dramatically, not like a movie, more like a man realizing the floor under him had always been tilted. He said, Rochelle, stop answering for her. The room went quiet in a different way. Grandma lifted her eyes to me, tired but clear enough to know she had been cornered. Her voice came out small. Ask about the white calendar. Rochelle's hand froze on the blanket. Just for half a second, her church smile disappeared. Preston blinked like the words meant nothing to him. But I knew exactly what she meant. The white calendar in her kitchen. The one she marked every evening in red pen. Not for appointments, but for who had actually come through her door. I did not have the white calendar with me. That was the first thing Rochelle noticed, and for one small second, relief came back into her face. She thought Grandma had handed me a memory I could not use in time. But Grandma had taught me something long before she ever got sick. Old women who live alone keep records because nobody believes them the first time. It's in her kitchen, I said. On the side of the refrigerator. Red pen. 6 months. Paula looked at me. Can someone bring it here? Darren was already reaching for his keys. Rochelle's voice sharpened. We cannot delay a medical decision because of a refrigerator calendar. We're not delaying it, Paula said. We're verifying information being used to make it. That sentence shifted the air in the room. Until then, Rochelle had been playing the organized daughter, the safe daughter, the one who knew how to sit upright in meetings and make concern sound like authority. Now she had to wait like the rest of us. Preston checked his phone twice. Gloria stopped touching the strap of her tote bag. Grandma closed her eyes. Not asleep, just saving strength. While Darren drove, Paula asked me to explain the care rotation I had drafted. My hands shook when I pulled the yellow legal pad from my bag. My voice didn't. I named Mrs. Klein for Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings. Darren for Tuesday and Thursday evenings. Home health for bathing. Me for medication setup and 2 overnights a week. Not 7? Paula asked. Not 7, I said. That was the mistake everyone let become the new normal. Grandma opened her eyes at that. Her mouth moved like she might smile, but she was too tired to bother with it. Rochelle leaned forward. A plan on paper doesn't mean someone will be there. Neither is a cousin in a church photo, I said before I could stop myself. Preston's face reddened. Gloria inhaled like I had cursed in the sanctuary. Paula looked up, not angry, just focused. Is there a concern about the accuracy of the caregiver information previously submitted? There it was, the doorway. I pulled up the screenshot of Gloria's post. Preston in Grandma's recliner, Preston holding my notebook, my initials visible on the page. LW overnight, 2:10 a.m. Refused water, settled after him. Gloria leaned over the table. That was a human interest post. Her voice had lost its softness. It was meant to encourage people. Then why was my notebook in his hands? I asked. Preston finally spoke. Because we were all helping. Grandma's eyes opened fully. "You came for pictures," she said. Her voice was thin, but it hit harder than anything I could have said. Preston looked at her like he had forgotten she was allowed to remember him. "Grandma, that's not fair." She blinked slowly. "I'm forgetful," she said. "I'm not blind." Darren returned 22 minutes later, with the white calendar rolled carefully in both hands like something fragile. He laid it on the conference table. Everyone leaned toward it. Red marks filled the squares. Lena, Klein, nurse, Darren, twice. Preston's name appeared 5 times in 6 months. Beside 3 of those dates, Grandma had written one word in small, crooked letters: photo. Paula looked at the calendar for a long moment. Then she looked at Rochelle. "This does not match the caregiver summary we received." Rochelle's face went still. "Not empty, calculating," she said. "My mother gets confused," Darren answered before I could. "Then why are her confused notes more accurate than our official paperwork?" No one had a clean response to that. Paula closed the Silver Pines folder and placed both hands on top of it. "We are not approving a transfer based on disputed caregiver information," she said. "Mrs. Royce's stated preference and the proposed home trial will be reviewed first." For the first time since I walked into that hospital, Rochelle was quiet because silence no longer protected her. It exposed her. The decision did not make Rochelle apologize. People like her do not collapse the first time a room stops believing them. They put on a different face, lower their voice, and look for the next bit of control. "I only wanted my mother safe," she said, staring at Paula instead of me. "If that has been misunderstood, I'm sorry people are choosing to see the worst in me." It was almost beautiful, the way she could stand beside a lie, even after the chair had been pulled out from under it. Paula did not argue with her. She simply began correcting the file. Preston's name came off the primary caregiver line. Mine went back on as one of the care contacts, but not alone. Darren's name was added beside mine, and I watched him swallow when he realized it was no longer a supportive opinion. It was a responsibility. Silver Pines was placed on hold. The home trial would be reviewed for 30 days. Home health notes, family coverage, and Grandma's stated preference would be included in the plan. Then Paula turned to Gloria. "Any outside organization using inaccurate caregiver information should correct it." Gloria's cheeks colored. "The church post was meant to encourage people. It encouraged them to believe something false," I said. She looked at Preston then, as if he might defend her, but Preston was busy staring at the floor. For the first time, the people who had built the story together were standing in different corners of it. That was not revenge. That was consequence. 2 evenings later, the outreach room at church smelled like coffee, paper napkins, and lemon cleaner. Gloria stood at the little podium where she usually announced casseroles, coat drives, and prayer chains. Rochelle sat in the second row with her purse clutched in both hands. Preston stood near the back door, wearing the same blank expression he used when a conversation might cost him something. I did not want to be there, but the lie had been public, so the correction had to be public too. Gloria unfolded a printed page. "Our previous post misidentified Preston Vale as Mrs. Royce's primary caregiver," she read. Her voice tightened around every word. "That was inaccurate. The post has been removed, and we apologize for the confusion." Confusion. Even then, she tried to make it sound accidental. I almost let it pass. Then Grandma, sitting beside me in her wheelchair, tapped the armrest once and said, "Not confusion, carelessness." The room went still. Gloria looked down and corrected herself. "For the carelessness." Afterward, Preston caught me in the hallway by the bulletin board. "You didn't have to embarrass me like that," he said. I looked at the flyers behind him, all those smiling announcements about service and sacrifice. "You stood in front of people and accepted thanks for nights you slept through," I said. He opened his mouth, but nothing useful came out. For once, his silence did not make him look humble. It made him look exactly as absent as he had been. Rochelle came to Grandma's house the first Wednesday after the hospital approved the home trial. She brought chicken soup in a glass container and stood in the kitchen like a guest who had forgotten if she still belonged. Darren was in the living room helping Grandma settle into her chair. Mrs. Klein had left a note on the counter about blood pressure. The new white calendar hung on the refrigerator, empty squares waiting to see who would actually show up. Rochelle set the soup down and said, "I need to talk to you without everyone watching." Her voice was smaller than it had been in the hospital, but not soft enough to be an apology. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and waited. She looked toward the living room, where Grandma was correcting Darren on how to fold the Afghan. "You don't know what it felt like," she said, "to watch my mother need you more than me." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Because underneath all the church smiles and clean folders, that was the wound she had been dressing up as responsibility. She had been ashamed that Grandma trusted me with the ugly parts, the bathroom falls, the midnight fear, the pills that stuck in her throat. But shame did not excuse what she had done with it. "You could have shown up," I said. "You chose to edit the story instead." Rochelle looked down at the soup. "So what now? I'm not allowed near my own mother." There it was again, the old trick. Turn a boundary into cruelty before I could even finish drawing it. This time, I did not follow her into it. "You can come," I said. "On Wednesdays for dinner. You can help, but you don't change appointments without telling me and Darren. You don't post pictures of Grandma for church. You don't speak for her when she is sitting right there. And nobody uses, Lena is trained for this, to dump the whole week on me again." Her eyes filled, but I had learned tears were not always the same as remorse. "So this is my punishment?" she asked. I shook my head and pointed to the calendar. "No, this is the schedule." She looked at it for a long time. Maybe she understood, for the first time, that love was going to require dates, names, and showing up when no one was clapping. The 30-day home trial was not perfect. Darren was late once. Rochelle oversalted the soup. Preston took one short Saturday shift and canceled the next. But nobody called me to cover for him. They left his square blank. Grandma noticed that and smiled without saying a word. One afternoon, she sat at the kitchen table, looking at all the names on the new calendar, and said, "Looks like they finally learned how many days are in a week." I kept the old calendar in the bottom drawer, not as a weapon, but as a reminder. But what I needed was never applause. I needed a family that understood love, was not standing in front of a church saying you sacrificed. Love was having your name on the calendar. It was coming on the day you promised, and not letting one exhausted woman call everyone else's absence her duty. What happened in my family taught me something I wish I had learned much earlier. Love is not proven by the stories people tell about themselves. It is proven by what they are willing to carry when no one is watching. Sometimes, the person who looks most devoted in public is not the person who stayed up at 2 in the morning. They cleaned the bathroom floor, measured the medicine, answered the same frightened question 3 times, and still showed up the next day. And sometimes the person everyone calls strong is not strong because life is easy for them. They are strong because everybody else kept handing them things and walking away. But being strong does not mean being endlessly available. It does not mean becoming the emergency plan for everyone who refuses to plan. It does not mean letting your family turn your kindness into a job description and your exhaustion into proof that you cannot be trusted. I learned that boundaries are not punishments. They are the shape love takes when love has been abused. A schedule can be love. A clear no can be love. Asking someone to show up on the day they promised can be love. Refusing to let one person carry the whole family is not selfish. It is the only way a family becomes honest. And I learned something else from Grandma's white calendar. The truth does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it is written in small red letters, one day at a time, by the person everyone assumed was too weak to notice. People may rewrite stories, polish lies, and pose for praise, but a life still leaves marks. Who came? Who didn't? Who called? Who disappeared? Who stayed when there was no applause? If this story touched something in your own family, I hope you remember this. You are allowed to stop being the quiet person who holds everything together while other people take credit for the peace. You are allowed to ask for fairness. You are allowed to name what really happened. And you are allowed to build a new kind of family order, one where love is not measured by words, but by presence. If this story meant something to you, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment to let me know. Tell me, have you ever been the one everyone depended on but nobody truly saw?